Rows and flows of angel hair and ice cream castles in the air and feather canyons everywhere. I've looked at clouds that way, but now they only block the sun. They rain and snow on everyone. So many things I would have done, but clouds got in my way.
Hello and welcome to And the Oscar Goes To, a podcast that discusses Oscar-nominated films. My name's Lauren.
And I'm Lily.
And on this episode, we will be taking a look at the Best Picture winner, CODA.
So CODA was directed by Sian Heder. She is a multiple award-winning and nominated director, so no shocker there. And then CODA won 3 awards this past Sunday, including the biggest Oscar award, Best Picture, and then actor in a supporting role and adapted screenplay.
I would like to say, in the last episode, I said West Side Story, but I also said CODA would be the actual winner.
Yes,
so
she did.
I'm correct.
And she won.
And I just want to say
we're going to give her an award for that.
If we really want to talk about the critical reception, because it's interesting this time because it's split among deaf reviewers. Mm-hmm. If we want to preface this by what CODA stands for, which is child of deaf adults. So that makes sense why there's deaf reviewers, obviously. But it's split, and it's interesting why. So for the good reasons, they talk about how it's a good movie to have. It talks about the helpless kind of part of it and not needing to be rescued. So
okay, so for those of you that haven't seen the movie or don't know, it is a movie about a child that has 2 deaf parents and a deaf brother. And so CODA stands for Child of Deaf Adults. And then the critical reception is interesting because of that.
Yeah. It's split among deaf reviewers. So the general people, like the hearing population, it's pretty high reviews. So that's not really a big surprise. It was a great movie. But the split goes in terms of deaf reviewers. So like the good ones kind of talk about how it's a refreshing story to see deaf characters that are leaders in a community. And it's a depth and nuance revival that is not normally talked about in movies. But also there's this bad part to it in terms of what representation looks like for deaf people. And this one reviewer mentioned that it kind of makes them look helpless in some situations, especially when they talk about, later we'll talk about it, the lead character is really interested in singing. And in the movie, it's kind of like the deaf community they're not involved with music. Like,
right.
They're kind of separated, but this reviewer is specifically saying like that's not true in the deaf community. Like music is still very much a part of that.
And I think they kind of got into that like towards the end of the movie because the dad like kind of started getting into the daughter's music a little bit. But I did feel like, at the beginning, it was like the mom was literally questioning the daughter, like, why are you doing like this? Like, if I was blind, would you choose to be an artist?
Yeah, that's what she said. But for more depth of what the synopsis is really, so she talked about it a little, but it tells the story of a deaf family and a hearing daughter, all of whom try to keep this fishing business afloat. And the daughter, Ruby, finds love for singing, but she struggles to find that balance between following what she wants to do and trying to help her family. She's never been outside of her family before. She is kind of like the interpreter for her entire life, which she talks about during the movie.
Yeah, and I feel like it was super interesting because during the movie there was like a few different dynamics, and one of them was that this daughter had been their family's interpreter for her whole life, and so she had been there like helping them with their fishing business. And then later in the movie they got into a predicament that she basically had to be on the boat with them because they needed like someone hearing on the boat while they fished. And so she was caught in between, like, wanting to help her family and doing the only thing that she's ever done, or going to pursue, like, what she actually wants to do with her life and go to school for singing.
I think the cast is interesting to look at. There's a lot of names I don't personally know, but Troy Kotsur, he is the one who won the Best Supporting Actor at the, I almost said Grammys for a second. at the Oscars. And when I was watching him for the first time, I was wondering if he'd ever done any work on plays, like stage acting. Mm-hmm. Because if you notice the way he acts, it's like really big in his gestures, yes. Which is kind of a given because he is doing sign language. But that's something I noticed immediately in it. He was on Broadway. I don't know for how long, but he was on Broadway, and he worked a lot in the deaf theater stages. So it's not surprising that he won. I think it's great.
No, I mean, yeah. And he, like, of course, he is deaf in real life. And so when he was, like, acting, like, throughout the whole movie, like, he literally didn't say anything, obviously. Like, he was signing the whole time. But there was just, like, such passion, like, from his character. Like, you could literally feel it through the screen.
And I, like, watched this interview, and they were talking about how it's Marlee Matlin? Yeah. Ruby's mom.
Yeah.
And in this interview, she's talking about how there were other actors being considered that weren't deaf to play these roles. And she really advocated for deaf people to play the roles. Obviously.
I think it would have been a mistake, honestly,
Definitely.
To have actors that aren't deaf. Because just the fact that they were deaf, like, it made it so authentic. Like, yeah. It literally...
I just don't see the point in hiring... No. Why would you go out of your way to hire someone when there's...
Yeah, when there's literally a guy who is an award-winning actor. Like, yeah. He did perfect. I couldn't have thought of anyone better to do his part,
it's really late, but it's, I guess, progression for them. Yeah. I mean, it's just really, like, a long time. But Marlee's won an Oscar before, like, a long time ago. Yeah. She was, I think, one of the first deaf actors to win. Yeah. I think so. She won an Oscar, but I think that's what it was for. But we don't really want to talk too much about the specifics of, like, the budgeting or
all that. Yeah,
we really want to focus on the story because the story was amazing, and if you don't cry multiple times while watching it, you're a psychopath. I'm sorry.
It was super emotional, honestly. I didn't have any, like, high hopes going into it. Honestly, I was just going into it.
I mean, after Don't Look Up, I understand,
but I am so glad that this movie won because it really was. Like, it was, like, the story, the different plots, like, the plots inside the plots, like, the whole thing.
What I enjoyed the most, like, under filming techniques, like, when I was taking notes, I didn't even really have that many, not, like, in a bad way, but because it was so focused exactly on the story only that it didn't even need anything crazy. Like,
no, it didn't. It's like the story,
very simple shots, and it was enough.
The story was so good in itself that they didn't need to do anything outside of the box or crazy.
And I think one of the major themes, even outside of the deaf community, is the teenage experience. Like, I was watching it, and I felt like I was 17 again. It's like when it's so angsty, like, you feel everything, and you think the world's ending, and, like, no one's listening to you, and that's exactly how she felt. And in a sense, that's correct. I mean, she has deaf parents. I mean, they can only understand so much of, like, what she's going through.
Right.
As you said earlier, like, she's born into this family where she is now their interpreter.
And they need her. Like, they rely on her. And at some point in the movie, there was kind of a little bit of resentment, like, towards Ruby and her older brother because he wanted to be the older brother and, like, take on the role of caretaking and, you know, taking care of the family and doing things that he just couldn't do because he was deaf. And so that kind of played a part. I thought that was a very interesting dynamic. I mean, in the end, obviously it's a beautiful, happy ending, but I did think it was cool that they included that because, I mean, that's a real life situation. Like, that probably does happen.
I mean, this movie in general, like, I've never really thought about families that only have specific members of it that don't.
Yeah. And a lot of the movie was quiet.
Yeah. I had to message you, and I was like, am I supposed to watch this with subtitles or not?
Yeah, and I was reading about it because I didn't even think about that. I wasn't like, oh, I need to put the subtitles on. It was just like, it's automatically already on the movie.
Yeah.
But it was like, you have to watch the screen. It's not like a get up and, like, vacuum your house.
And I know some people are really against subtitles. I love subtitles, but this is a movie that I think is very much worth it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not in any way distracting. Like, I'm not one of those people who thinks the subtitles are an issue. But one thing I do want to point out is there are subtitles for the entire movie except one scene. And it's the part where the teacher asks Ruby how singing makes her feel.
How do you feel when you sing? hard to explain.
Try.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And she uses sign language in the moment, and there's no subtitles there, but there's enough that you can understand exactly what she means, and I love that part.
That actually was a good scene because she couldn't put into words like what singing meant to her.
And like the teacher understood immediately. And
yeah.
It was the same way I think for most audience members who will watch it, that I don't know, you just understand it just from like her facial expression and the movements, and it's like,
and just like the passion that she has. Yeah. Definitely. And that's like the only way that she could think of was normal to like describe her love for singing. I thought that was really cool too. I honestly didn't notice that they had this up.
Really? I thought it was so interesting. But there was another part that I noticed. There's like the court scene, and then there's like kind of like that town hall with the fishermen. And it's like, like as a person who is hearing, right? We're never thinking about needing an interpreter. Like,
ever.
But in these situations, especially the court scene, they were not even offered one. And Ruby had to speak for them in these instances, which is just kind of not something I even think about, but it's inaccessibility.
Yeah. And like a lot of times in the movie, like you don't realize, of course, but like when you watch the movie and you put yourself in their shoes, like it is hard, obviously, to do day-to-day things. Like they were fishing, their family has a fishing business and that's what they do. And they got in trouble because they couldn't hear the sirens going off or like the Coast Guard like calling to them. And that was like their livelihood. That's like what they did to make money. That's what the dad's dad did to make money. And it was honestly, it was like hard to watch too, because it's like it put Ruby, this young high school girl, like in such a predicament on what to do. Like, does she follow her passion? Does she go for singing, or does she stay back and help her family who desperately needs her because they can't fish without her because they can't afford an interpreter or a signer?
I just remember watching all of they had like a few different arguments, but it was the one between the parents and her after she had her like love interest come over for the practice. They had this like singing practice, and they're in the middle of doing it, and her parents are like at it in the next room over. Obviously they can't hear themselves,
and they're very loud,
but they go downstairs, and Ruby's obviously very angry that like her friend had to witness this. It's so awkward, and they're intensely signing, but I wonder if it's extremely like frustrating to not be able to just like yell.
Okay.
Dad, no. Oh my God, Miles, go.
Nice to meet you.
Just please go.
And of course, Ruby can yell. All of them can yell. Like, they have that ability, but it's like, I don't feel like it has the same effect as it would among hearing people, you know?
Yeah.
So I just, like, I could feel the frustration. I don't know if that's like a thing or not, but that's
sure
how I
it is.
felt.
Yeah, because I feel like even when the dad and the mom argued, like, I think I only remember one time, like when they were in the bed, you know, and she was like, "Oh, I don't want Ruby to go to college. Like, she's my baby, blah, blah, blah. What if she sucks at singing?" But they were signing, but they were like arguing with each other. And like, you could tell they were very frustrated. And it's like, they make like sounds kind of like you could, when they get more mad, or when they were getting like more mad in that scene, like they would like huff and puff like more than normal.
I mean, if anything, while we're talking about this, I just feel like it shows how ignorant everyone is about the deaf community. Like, there's stuff like this that I never even think about.
No.
And for people who are deaf, like, this is probably just, I mean, it's like normal life.
This is just
like,
a normal
especially if you're born
things,
into it like this. But I wrote here that I just think signing in general added so much to it that I don't think dialogue could have anyways. Like, if this was a movie, I mean, it'd be a completely different movie, obviously, but if one of them could speak without signing, I don't know if it would change anything. Like, I thought the signing did a lot for them. Like
I did too.
they're putting
Yeah.
their body into it almost.
Yeah, and
that's why I feel like it's really similar to stage acting. Like when you do plays and stuff, everything's bigger.
Everything is bigger. Yeah.
So,
and I read that the girl that played Ruby, she like trained for like over 6 months.
is she hearing or no?
She's hearing.
Oh. I
Yeah,
didn't know that.
over 6 months for like learning how to sign and do all the things because she was very spot on. Okay, so on the movie, all of the on-set interpreters were CODAs. So they were all
really?
children of deaf adults. Yeah, I thought that was really cool
That's
that
really
they included.
sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like after watching this movie, I don't know, it just kind of gives you a better understanding. I feel like people get so wrapped up like in their own life that a lot of people, even in the movie, like characters, they just didn't know how to deal like with the fact that they were deaf. Like they didn't even think about it or, and I just feel like after watching it, it does just bring so much like, it just makes you think like about how other people like have to live their life and how hard it can be.
Outside of the movie, like I was watching their acceptance speech for winning Best Picture, and then I'm forgetting his name. Sorry. Troy Kotsur. When he won his speech is so great, and he's signing most of it, but they also have the interpreter doing it as well, and the interpreter is like getting emotional while talking for him, and it was really cute. But you watch the crowd, and they're all clapping with signing,
with the sign class,
which is I think is just so nice. I know that's kind of the bare minimum, but I thought it was a sweet moment.
Yeah, but I mean, if that's all, I mean, I don't know. He couldn't expect like people.
Yeah,
but
I'm sure.
I think that was just like a nice gesture.
Yeah,
of people to
I just thought
show
it was
their
interesting to
appreciation.
see.
Yeah,
and it was a big deal because this was, I have it written down, the second deaf actor to ever win.
Yes.
So
I read that too.
That's crazy, and he's the first deaf male actor nominated for an Oscar, and then won it.
Yeah.
So it's a
for
big
this
deal.
movie.
And in that interview I was mentioning earlier with Marlee Matlin, she was talking about how she hopes this isn't like the last time that something like this happens because it's not normalized yet. Like, yes, this will be like the second one to ever win, but she was really advocating for like movies to include people more and not just have it, based, like this movie is completely about CODA, right?
Right.
But to have other movies that include deaf people regardless. Even if it's not centered around them, like to have that involvement's important.
And I think people do, like, especially after this movie, need to move forward with like that kind of mindset. Like everyone, like deaf people are watching movies too, and like
I don't know, it's not that hard to put the captions on. Like I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Not. And like he can act, they can all act.
Yeah,
and
like what a shame to
deaf.
have never like seen this movie or like had these actors to never see them perform because of their inability to hear. Like that's ridiculous. Like,
and they're so talented. Like it's almost like because he's deaf, he took it like to the next level and really did an amazing job at his character.
Do you want to talk about some more of your favorite scenes?
Okay, so one of the first ones that stood out to me was when Mr. V, which was her choir teacher, who then coached her to get into Berkeley, he was giving her her very first voice lesson at his house, and she wasn't singing like with enough passion. So it's like she was kind of like in her chest, and like he kept mentioning like you have to sing with your stomach. And he told her to make the ugliest sound that she could, and she told him that, well, when I very first started school, like I got bullied because I sounded weird. And he was like, what do you mean you sounded weird? And she was like, I sounded like a deaf person, like when I talked, because she had never like been exposed enough to like talking normally. And so he was like, okay, well, make that sound. And then she felt awkward.
Honestly, the ugliest sound she made wasn't that ugly.
I know. And so
it sounded pretty melodic to me.
Yeah, and he was like, okay, well, make the ugliest sound. So they're like holding hands like this and like making like not grunting.
It wasn't even grunting.
It was like a loud scream. It wasn't even that ugly. And then they screamed at each other, and it was like kind of in like an exercise way. And then he could tell like she got mad enough, and then he was like, okay, you're ready. And then they started singing again. And it was like night and day difference, like how she sang. And I was honestly like, that was the first time I teared up at just such like that little scene. Just because, I don't know, he just like brought out like so much emotion in her.
No, I did tear up at the point.
It was so good.
It wasn't even that into the movie. Like,
no, that was like one of
that
was like one of the first scenes that
so I will
like,
be
took
crying,
a note on.
like actually crying during this movie, which is great.
And then also throughout the whole movie, Ruby and this guy who becomes her love interest are like rehearsing for this duet that they sing at their choir concert. And so it's like you hear the song like on and off throughout the whole movie a lot, right?
Right.
It's repeated a lot. So, and then at the concert, her parents and her brother went to the concert, and it was like really interesting because they, like, everyone else was like, you know, getting into the music, like clapping, and like they were like talking about what they're gonna eat for dinner, like signing about what they're gonna eat
because
for dinner.
they cut out the sound. So
yeah, so it's like the first time, and this just like, I don't know, it just really stood out because the first time that we as like the viewers are going to hear the song perform like all the way through, like, you know, singing as loud as they can on stage, it goes quiet. So it's like we can't hear it. And I feel like I was like kind of wanting to hear the song because it had so much like anticipation for the song. Not like a crazy amount, but you know.
No, I mean,
but
they
then it's
practiced
like,
for it
I'm
and
thinking
stuff.
about it and I'm like, they muted the song for the whole song and it was just silent. Like it was just like what the parents were hearing. Nothing. And then the parents were like looking around and like seeing other people cry and we're like noticing that, oh, they're crying because my daughter's singing. But I don't know. It was like them as parents, like they can't hear her. Like they'll never be able to hear her.
Yeah. I think this reminds me of, it's another Oscar. I think it won last year. It won Oscar for Best Sound. And it's similar. It's about, it's called Sound of Metal. Did I say that already? I don't know if I did. Sound of Metal. And it's basically about this guy who's a drummer and he starts to lose his hearing. And so they do a similar thing, but it's throughout the movie where you kind of like hear the progression of him losing his hearing. And it has the same effect. It makes you like want to hear even more.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that transfers to people who aren't hearing. You know, like
sure.
if they have that desire or not, because they have that dialogue where, I mean, they're signing to one another like, what are we going to have for dinner? Like,
right. It's
so
like
I wonder
very,
if they even have the frustration or if it's just, you know, like another thing.
But then it's like after, like nearing the end of the movie, the concert was like nearing the end of the movie. And then when they got home, the dad, like at the concert, I mean, to me, he just like seemed kind of agitated. Not super agitated, but, you know, just kind of annoyed. Like, what are we doing here? And then they got home and the dad like told the mom, like, hey, I'm just going to get some air. So Ruby goes out and like sits on the truck tailgate with him. And
I wrote that one down too. The scene is so good.
So the dad wanted to know. He's like asking his daughter, like, what is the song about? And she is telling him like it's about what it means to like need someone and like love someone fully. Or something like that. And he asked her to sing it for him when they got home.
Oh, the entire time it's happening.
So, yeah, she was singing it for him and they're like close and he's like touching her neck and like touching, you know, just to like feel the vibrations of her. Oh, it was so cute.
It was such a good moment.
With my arms open wide, I threw away my pride. I'll sacrifice for you, dedicate my life to you. I will go where you lead, always there in time of need. And when I lose my will, you'll be there to push me up the hill. There's no looking back for us. We got love, sure enough, that's enough. You're all that I need.
It was
one of the best scenes. I think it said so much.
And then after that, I mean, it's just like towards the end, it was like good.
It's
scene
like getting
good
punched in the face multiple times. Like it really hurts in like a good way.
But you can't look away.
There's
it's
this
like
one
so
scene.
captivating.
You get to, it's her audition for Berkeley, which she almost decides to not even go to, and she shows up to it last minute. And her family's
Because her
not
dad
allowed.
makes her go.
Her family's not allowed in, obviously, because it's on audition. But they're really trying to get in. And she starts, and everything's going wrong. Her piano accompanist. She doesn't even have her.
Yeah, she forgot her
music.
sheet music.
Yeah. So the teacher, Mr. V comes in and plays for her. And as she's playing, you know, it's not great. She's all right. But her family shows up in the balcony.
She's not singing with their gut.
Yeah, she's not doing the breathing exercises enough, so they restart. But the family walks in and they watch her perform, and in the middle of it, she starts signing, and it's so good.
And she starts
so
signing
good.
it to them so they know what she's singing. And then it's like, it's almost like when she starts signing is when she starts singing, like singing, you know, like is like being really good. It was so cute. And then she did get into Berkeley. Spoiler.
She gets into Berkeley.
She got into Berkeley, and the parents, I thought the end of the movie was really good, and they didn't leave any loose ends. Like, they wrapped it up really nicely, because throughout the whole movie, it was this progression of, well, she didn't want to go to college. She doesn't think there's anything for her in college. And then she decides that, okay, I love singing. I want to go to college. She gets trained to go to Berkeley. And then the fishing thing happened, that feels very obligated to stay home and help her family. And then her parents obviously don't want her to go because it's going to be tricky for them. But it's like at the end of the movie, when she's singing and signing her audition song, it's like flashing through different scenes, and it's like her family like making it in the world, kind of like the mom was like super awkward and like not awkward, but just like didn't like talk to hearing people much or wasn't comfortable around them, and it showed their new business, and like she's like signing to hearing people, and like they're all laughing and having fun, and the dad and the son are like going into a bar, like going to hang out with some other people that are outside of the deaf community.
It's just like the whole beginning of the movie, you kind of see the family in their own world, because I mean, it's not their fault either, because their community is very much like not interested in having to be a part of that, either because they're uncomfortable or just like not willing. But by the time, I guess, between both hearing and non-hearing people finally decide to
it's like
come together, and
it's like
at the
they
end
are finally accepted into the community.
Yeah.
And like people want to learn like some sign language to be able to communicate with them, and like they're more welcoming of them. And
I want to talk about I think this is my favorite scene, maybe my favorite scene. It's the only spoken word the dad has. Do you remember this scene? She comes back, I don't know if it's before or after she gets into the car and comes back out of the car when she's leaving for college.
oh yeah,
It's either before or after, I'm not sure, but the dad's only word that he says the entire time is go. And it's like, it killed me. It was so good, the way that it was placed and everything. But
because he did really want her to go. Like at first he was like not accepting of her music, and like they just didn't understand it.
I mean, it's a hard scene to go with
Yeah.
anyways. Like, just leaving for college is such a huge deal anyways. But leave
leaving
like
for
something,
college and then leaving her
literally
whole-
everything you
yes,
know
behind.
and this family that you're such an integral part of is really.
And I feel
sad.
like this movie did touch on, it kind of like, I don't know, touched on like whether you are deaf or hard of hearing or whatever, like communication, like with a deaf person and a hearing person or hard, whatever. It's a two-way street. And like at the beginning of the movie, it was like the family had to try like so hard to even hear like the town meeting or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like there wasn't an interpreter provided. Like that's why they count on Ruby so much. But they wrapped it up in the end because, like I said, like they were being accepted into their community very nicely. I just thought it ended so good.
You leave 'em laughing when you go, and if you care, don't let 'em know. Don't give yourself away. I've looked alive from both sides now, from give and take, and still somehow it's love's illusions I recall. I really don't know love at all.
So
Approximately 2 days ago, the Oscars happened, and a lot happened at the Oscars.
a lot happened at the Oscars.
And we're going to talk about it as if you hadn't heard it already.
As if you haven't seen it all over
Will
social
Smith
media.
completely demolished.
There
Will
was a little
Smith.
bit of a fight on stage.
And you know what? It was entertaining. And I don't care if it was fake or if it wasn't fake. I had a good time. And that's all I wanted to say.
We just want to let you know that we thought the slap was a nice added piece.
I think it broke up the
To the
show in a
show.
good way.
No,
With their
everyone's
low
busy.
ratings, I think the Will Smith slap was necessary, and I still don't think it helped. However, they did decide to
Dude,
not,
that's what I'm saying.
they
I feel
decided
like-
to not even show this is like a problem with people who work in the industry, and they understand. I'm not really one. I'm an intern, but as an intern, I get it. The people who did like the editing, they weren't even invited, or they either weren't invited or they didn't even show it during the show. Like if you won, you didn't get a moment to come on stage
that
because
seems
they
very
replaced
messed
it
up.
with a ton of other people that were not related to the event. Which is the tea.
I feel like the people that edited the movies are like very.
You wouldn't have a
important.
movie.
You wouldn't
The thing
have
about
a
making
movie.
movies is that every single person, you need a ridiculous amount of people to even make the movie, and then to not even include them, you wouldn't have a movie without every single person involved.
But you definitely wouldn't have a
Without
movie
an editor,
if you couldn't
like-
edit it.
Good luck with that. 30 hours of footage or whatever.
And
like,
I feel
that's
like they
insane.
invite like so many random people go that like are famous, but that are literally like in no part in movies.
Yeah.
Which I get it. It's just like a celebrity event, but like they should definitely prioritize. Who
I
they're
just can't
inviting.
imagine spending like a year editing a movie.
And then not even like, and then winning an
With-
award for it, and then not even getting
Imagine
any
being
recognition.
like your parents are so excited for you to, I don't know, win an Oscar and you don't get to go on stage. You get
or
it, you get it
even
in the
go
mail.
to the event. You get it shipped to you in an Amazon box.
Mailed to you with no plaque
What
on
a
it.
bummer!
That's such a shame. But
That
you
really
know,
is.
it was saved by the slap.
I
will
wonder
think
how
about
the
forever.
viewings were. I wonder if they were up or down. I feel
What
like they've
were?
been down.
I think I saw a chart. Don't quote me on this. This is not researched. I saw it on Instagram that the viewing, like the ratings were really bad. Even after the
feel like-
slap, they weren't great.
Yeah, I feel like the ratings have been bad, like for the
And
past few years.
That's another episode that I could talk about forever, and how the Oscars are very problematic in the film world anyways.
Yeah, I would imagine. So overall, this film did win the Oscar,
Overall.
and I do think it deserved it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it definitely deserved it over all the other movies that won. And I feel like this was a huge win for the deaf community.
I think so. I don't think it's much of an upset. I think the majority of people were pretty much rooting for it.
I think
Even
yeah.
the people who lost, I don't think it
I mean,
was-
how can you be mad if you lose to this movie?
I would be mad if I lost to Don't Look Up.
Yeah. Peep our first episode if you want to hear our thoughts on
The
Don't Look Up.
trashing of Don't Look Up.
Because if that would have won, yeah, we would have had some
I don't
problems.
even know where I would begin with that.
Okay, so we're going to say our ratings at the same time.
At the same time.
On 3.
Okay.
1.
Oh.
Oh.
Sorry, at 3.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. 9.
10. You give it a 9?
Yeah, because I feel
No.
like you can't
I give it a 10. I
Okay.
can give it a 10, and I'm giving it a 10.
Okay, I give it a 9, but full disclosure, I feel like movies just I would never rate a movie a 10. So
I would like to preface this by saying
10.
she texted me and said there's nothing wrong with this movie, and she's giving it a 9. You
I
can
feel
reflect
like there's
on that.
always room to improve. Okay,
No,
okay, we're gonna redo that.
I will
Okay,
be
let's
giving it a
say-
10.
Let's say our ratings on 3 again.
Well, you know
1,
mine already.
2, 3, 10.
Oh.
It was a great movie. I'm glad it won the Oscar. Shout out to Mrs. Hader for directing this film.
Shout out, I guess. She's going to tease the next episode.
Okay, so on our next episode, we decided to do our version of the Oscars. So we're going to pick like 3 movies each, and then we're going to review them, and then we're going to decide which one should the Oscar go to.
Because we're the people who know. And what I'm trying to say is, like, we don't have any type of background to be doing this, but we're going to do it anyways.
Yeah,
These are completely based
This is
based off
on
of
our
selfish reasoning
yes,
and movies that we think are good. And
you
I
know
don't
what?
care
We
if
might
for you they're
choose
not great.
Some movies that people hate.
Don't Look Up is going on my list. It's not. I don't know what I've decided yet.
I haven't decided.
I need to think about it. That's all the time we have for today. But join us next time for our next episode. We're talking about our own Oscars.
Yeah, and we're
making
gonna
our
each
own.
pick 3 movies from 2021.
We have zero credibility. However,
But it's
we're
still
going to do it
be fun.
anyways, and I hope you like it. I hope you can agree with my choices and not Lily's.
But I know that mine are gonna win the Oscar. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Bye.
thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Oscar Goes To. I'm Lily.
I'm Lauren.
Have a good night.
To say I love you right out loud. Dreams and schemes and circus crowds. I've looked at a life that way.